Okay, YouTube, I've got another little snippet for my XR200R. This is the pivot point for the shock in the back, and both parts of this, the bearings, needed to be replaced. They were totally shot, and I figured I would show you this one here, how I go about it. And if you look real close, if this camera's focusing right, you can see that there's two. There's this outer rim which does not move, and then you got this intersection, and this inner piece looks just like this. Cost about 12 bucks on eBay, and you can see there's a little hole in there, and that hole needs to match up with the Zerk fitting hole, which is right here. So it doesn't have to be perfect, you can get it pretty close, but basically you can see, just kind of rest that bearing right on here and get it lined up as best you can. And I'm going to lubricate this all up. And then I have this little press that I made, and you can see it's pretty rudimentary, just a little bottle jack on it, and a couple pieces of angle iron, and this should press that bearing in just perfect. And I'm going to use this socket so that the bearing can come, the old one can go right through the center of the socket, and we should be able to get that done. So here I go. Okay, YouTube, I got that bearing out. If you can see, it was so packed with old grease that it was literally welded in there. When it first popped loose, I thought I broke the whole bracket, but thank goodness it didn't. It just broke the bearing loose, and I was able to press it out, and the new one is in its place, and the hole is lined up perfect. So it should be good to go, and that's all I got on this part, so I'm going to go ahead and put this the rest of the way together. And what goes in there is this part here, the bearing that goes inside that race, and I had to buy a new one because the old one was just trashed. And there's the Honda part, if you can make out what it is, for that race, or not race, but bearing. Okay, I put the pivot linkage back onto the shock, and if you look at the shock, you can see where the reservoir line is for the gas charged shock. It's in the front. You follow down and you look at the linkage here. The smaller part of the linkage is going to be on the bottom. So the way it's going to be orientated in the bike is you've got the front tire this direction. The linkage will be sitting in the bike like this. This lower, smaller part of the arm will be attached to this part that's pivoting below the swing arm. Then the larger part, this part up here, will be attached right here onto the swing arm. Every connection point has a torque spec, including that one down there. That one I torqued down to 50 foot-pounds, so the max on it is 54, and I went to 50 foot-pounds on that connection down at the bottom, and that's a 14mm bolt. And all the other bolts are also 14mm with the exception of this larger one here, and I believe this is a 17. And then there's also a pivot point right here, and the torque spec on that is between 27 and 35. So I'll get the torque specs and I'll give them to you here in just a second. I go over to my sheet over here that I have posted on the wall, and let's see, it says the swing arm pivot bolt is torqued down between 51 and 72 foot-pounds. The rear shock absorber upper bolt is torqued down between 43 and 54 pounds. The shock absorber lower bolt is between 27 and 35 foot-pounds. The rear suspension linkage pivot bolt, the swing arm to link arm, is 65 to 87. Link arm to connecting rod is 43 to 54, and connecting rod itself is 43 to 54. So If you need me to repeat those, just send me a note and I'll post it on the site. Thank you. Okay, everybody, just to let you know that, putting the rear shock on seems like a pretty straightforward and easy thing to do, and yes, it is straightforward, but you got to do it in a certain way or it'll fight you. In other words, it fought me a little bit. When you're putting this pivot arm in, connect the top of the shock first, roll the shock into place, and pivot that linkage arm down as you're rolling it into place. And then put this bolt on first, and then the one on the bottom second. And it'll go in pretty easy for you. Other than that, if you go a different route, you're going to fight it like I did. So do it that way and everything should go just fine. Well, I have on my computer the diagram of the rear end of the bike. I don't know how well you'll be able to see it, but here it is. I'll zoom in on the shock, and it shows all the torque specs. Okay guys, here's a little supplement. This is an 83 I picked up on a trade. I definitely made out on this trade. This bike starts up the first kick. It needs a little bit of carburetor work. There's some pieces to the carburetor that are broken that I'm gonna fix. But other than that, it's got a new chain and sprockets on both sides. The rear tire is brand new. The front is hardly used at all. And can't wait to get into this one and start working on it. Got to finish the other one first though. Okay, this is an 83 by the way.